Well, hello, and as promised, here are my own recommendations for the 21st New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax tournament. Probably the 2 weeks of the year where everyone is at least a little bit interested in New Japan, even if they do nothing else meaningful for the rest of the year. You would have to be really dedicated though to watch all 10 shows. I watched 3 in full. Lucky for me, there's a real sort of hardcore New Japan fan on ProWrest.tv that, as far as I can tell, did watch everything. So, and recommended quite a bit. So you can have a look at the effect he had on our 2011 Match of the Year candidate list over there, and see if any of the matches that I don't have here end up delivering for you. I hope that Butte, the YouTube uploader, hasn't given up on uploading the G1. He's up to day 7, I believe now. I hope he finishes, because it does help the people, the casual viewers, the more casual New Japan viewer to watch this stuff. But this is what I would recommend. It's at least of a very good, 3 3/4 standard, with 5 great matches that I would say are must see. I'll have a spoiler alert in the title, and I'll give another right now. I'm about to say who won the tournament, and that was Nakamura Shinsuke. Not a great surprise. He was the biggest modern New Japan star that hadn't yet had a tournament victory attached to his list of accomplishments. So this year he reached that milestone. From a fan's perspective, he looked great doing it. This was definitely a turnaround for him in terms of producing great stuff. Great stuff. Up until this tournament, the best match he had this year was against Shiozaki at Wrestle Kingdom, and that's not even what I consider great. And all the good qualities of that match were pretty much due to Shiozaki, in my opinion. So, and it's a shame because he's such a talented guy, and you'd really want to see more of this. But this was definitely a return to form for him, for certain. Although it has been said, and I do agree with this, that if you're not already suspect to enjoying watching what Nakamura does in the ring, these aren't the matches that are going to make you a fan necessarily. I would say that's a fair statement to make. It probably would apply to everybody, but I'd say it's a fair enough statement. But he won the tournament, and he'll be challenging Tanahashi for the title in Kobe in September. Hopefully they deliver something more worthwhile and memorable than what they did in May of this year. Very forgettable that was. One thing that you hope for with the G1 as well is different people getting brought in for interesting matchups. They didn't really have that this year. Takayama was the most interesting, and he really had an off tournament, kind of spurred on some talk on the forums that he should be thinking about retirement, which he should always obviously have in the back of his head anyway because of the health. But I don't know. It wasn't too long ago, but you could always rely on him and Sano to have at least a solid tag match on every Noah show. So I'm not going to say that it's impossible for him to deliver anything memorable ever again, but here he didn't really deliver, although there were some surprise performances. And the top of that list, I would say, was Yano versus Tanahashi on day 9. I said in my little preview there that if you're more likely to get the best match out of 2 inconsistent workers if it happens in the G1 Climax. But even I wouldn't have predicted this. I don't think anyone would have predicted this. Yano is a guy who I think is enjoyable enough in a light-hearted comedy context, but I wouldn't count on him to deliver something actually meaningful. He did it here, but not without help. He had the help of Korakuen Hall, and this is proof again that Korakuen is one of the best venues in the world to experience wrestling. This is what I said on the forums to describe this match. I said, it seemed like for one night, Korakuen decided that Yano was their favourite wrestler in the world, and they were going to steer him towards a victory at all costs. The first time Yano blocked the frog splash, it felt like a huge deal, and he did it again. This time amid a ref bump, the inclusion of a steel chair, and most striking of all, a bloody Tanahashi that was being heavily booed. What kind of miracle was this? Part of me is inclined to say that this was the best match from the tournament, but there's another match that has not only worked better, but also features a charming performance from a guy that you wouldn't expect great things from, and that was Nakamura versus Tenzan from day 3. Simple. Tenzan gets in far more than you would expect, and just in general brings that effort, and thus you get to see everything that makes Nakamura great, not just him running through his moves, which is fun enough in its own right, I think anyway. You get to see him show vulnerability, escape from bad situations, put that decisive stamp on the move that ends the match. I think the moment I knew that I liked this match was when Tenzan just added that extra slam, that extra bit of pressure onto the Anaconda. He did that several times for the rest of the tournament, but it never had the same impression that it did against Nakamura. I'm going to go ahead and say my pick for the best match of this tournament. Just great stuff there. Elsewhere, you had Karl Anderson making an impression for the second year in a row. I don't know, the way he puts over his finisher, the diving neckbreaker, in his standout matches, it's not anything new or original. In fact, that's probably one of the simplest ideas you can bring to a match, but he just gets it. I mean, his matches just benefit so much from it. The right number of finisher reversals and or finisher attempts, the desperation in trying to strike with it, and with something as easy to execute as the diving neckbreaker, it also makes sense that he should be trying so hard. It's amazing to me that this guy gets it, whereas we have someone like Sugiura tossing out the Olympic slam like it doesn't matter a damn. But yeah, standout match with Nakamura, good bully dynamic with Suzuki Minoru, and depending on what people saw in that Goto Anderson match, that might be another one worth checking out. I really didn't see much in that myself, but yeah, good showing for Karl Anderson, definitely. And I just mentioned Suzuki, so let's go with that. It can be hard to show why you would be a fan of his when he has matches like that stinker with Sugiura in May. I mean, I said in the review of that show that the Murdoch match was worse. The more I think about it, the more I want to take that back. I mean, the Murdoch match wasn't so much bad as it was just a whole lot of nothing. I mean, when it was over, I was like, okay, I didn't really like it, but it didn't piss me off. The Suzuki match pissed me off. It was just not good stuff. But this G1, thankfully, shows why someone would be a fan of his, of Suzuki Minoru. He bullies Kojima on the first day, and that match would have been great if it wasn't for, you know, Kojima's inconsistencies. And he bullies Karl Anderson to something really good as well. And then he has the standout match on the last day with Nakamura. They just really brought the hate in this one. Again, when the pressure mounts within the match, Nakamura just is really good at getting the match to that sweet spot and ending it when it peaks. You know, that's kind of just a gut feeling on whether or not the match is going that way. It's kind of hard to judge, but he just really gets it, and it's just really good to see. There are several other good performances individually. Lance Archer, who most of you will know as Lance Hoyt or Vance Archer from WWE and TNA. Really good slugfest there with Bernard. And then MVP had what I would say is his best match in New Japan so far against Goto. You can tell that MVP is really trying hard to show to the fans that he actually cares, because the way he behaves makes it look like he's in this epic headline match with so much effort. You know, he's going bare-chested, he's taking chops, that sort of stuff. You know, he's plugging himself into the Japanese mindset, whereas someone like Archer comes in and just does what he's always done and just feels like an outsider because of it. That works for him because he's a heel, but you know what I mean. But you know, it might not take MVP to great things like quicker than you might expect, I guess, because he's still doing stuff like the ball and elbow, which I understand definitely because fans will remember it from the WWE, but it doesn't really work in a combat sports context. But still, he and Goto had a very good match that managed to get momentum back after it had lost it, which is hard to do as well. And I just felt good about MVP after this tournament. They really wanted to push him, and he gave effort in this one, so you know, let's see where that goes. And the final, which was Naito versus Nakamura. Some people had this predicted, actually, and I was surprised because I was surprised that Naito made it, but I have to admit, it didn't feel forced. You know, if he were in there in the final next year, for example, it would have been, by then, if they had kept up the constant, you know, placing of big things for him, for Naito, if he were in the final next year, it would have felt safe, comfortable, but a little dull as well. This year it's a bit of a calculated risk, but they did a good job reading the crowd. They knew that he was ready. They figured that he was ready, and he was. I'll concede that. He upset Tanahashi in 5 minutes on the last day, and while I love the visual of that, I don't necessarily think that Naito did himself justice with it. At least for my personal taste, because his offense was, simply put, it was a lot of roll-ups, really. You know, the only thing I'm thinking of watching that is, why not let him get some big moves in out of nowhere and get the pin that way. I know it's a balancing act, you have to protect Tanahashi as well, but he didn't have to knock Tanahashi out or anything like that. I mean, he could have, got a big move in and then won it out of nowhere. Actually, he might have done that, but there were a lot of roll-ups in the match. That kind of what you're kind of remembering after it's over, apart from the fact that it's a surprise, it's a upset. So that kind of a little complaint, but the way they did it, it wouldn't have been my way, but the fans did respond well to it, and that's what matters, I guess. So that's that. And the final match itself, I don't recommend it, but that shouldn't stop you from watching it. It's a big deal, certainly, and both guys look good, but there's filler limb work for the most part, and the finish stretch is really pretty heavy on near falls, I would say. But in the end, Nakamura wins. I congratulate Nakamura-san for doing so, and I would hope that he goes on a tear after this. We'll wait and see. All my recommended matches should be down there in the description. I hope you enjoyed watching or listening to me ramble about stuff. And that's all for me.